from an inmate at the Department of Corrections. This call will be recorded and monitored. If you wish to block any future calls of this nature, dial 7 now. To accept this call, press 5 now. To decline this call.
Well, hello there, Erica. Oh, I'm doing just fine. This battle continues. Yes, I really enjoy hearing that your supportive relationships are out there taking care of you and giving you all of the care and support and representation that you need because it makes my job easier, makes your job easier, and it keeps the Department of Corrections in line. Yeah, yeah, and we're following that stuff in the news. I know there's a lot of bills that they're talking about passing that will help you guys, but of course, my big thing is the medical. I just don't like the way the Department of Corrections is treating people, their mental health, mental wellness, the basic issues that you may have, like asthma or diabetes or even cancer. Okay, and that's good because before you went in, you did see a doctor, which is I commend you on that. Respect because you got the letter from the doctor and you know your conditions and you know the medication you need, and you gave it to the staff, and that helps because it covers you. Hopefully, nothing bad will come out of this, and you'll be able to get out relatively healthy. But you got to stay on top of it. And your mother, oh my goodness, she's just fantastic. She keeps the public notified on her Facebook page, and she's gotten involved in community work. So she's keeping everybody up to date, and it's really hard for the Department of Corrections to do something wrong when they're in the spotlight. And so it's just like any criminal out there. They're most likely to commit a crime when nobody's watching. And if you're shining the light and you're broadcasting the conversations and sharing the results, it keeps them in line. And that's what we want for you, and that's what supportive relationships do. Well, for me, I I know there's a lot of issues that could easily go to court, but people tend to back down. I'll start working with somebody. They're shining light on the issue, and then the Department of Corrections officials will come down, talk to them, and they want to back out. And with you guys, it's harder because you're under their jurisdiction. So if you're having an issue with maybe you're not getting gluten free food, one issue did, then we could we could complain about that and we could file. But if the DOC comes up to you and says, hey, we'll work with you on this, just don't tell anybody, you get some benefits that you've been looking for, some special privileges or something. You may have the tendency just to back down, or they could
You have
threaten you,
60 seconds remaining.
and that will kind of put a little spook in your spark. Yeah, I know. I've heard that a lot. There's a lot of folks out there that says no, it's not going to affect me, and I commend you for that. But they know the pressure. They've been doing this for years. A lot of them have a lot of experience, and the stuff is written down in their training or their little updates and stuff that they have. So just be careful. They
You
want to
have
do
30
that.
seconds remaining.
But having your mother out here speaking on your behalf, that will help. So if anybody's going to bring a court case, have one of your supportive relatives do that. Yes. Good. But you're on the right track. And I really am not going to say or do anything to get you off that track. Okay, well, good. And I'll fight the fight. Thanks for the call. Good luck in your endeavors.
Thank you for using inmate call. Goodbye.
Hello, and welcome to AQS Inmate Call. I am your host, Joel Wilborn. And in this episode, I would like to discuss the ethics or lack of ethics within the Department of Corrections. Now, I am particularly interested in the Washington Department of Corrections because of all of the DOCs I work with. They do the oddest things. And the more I press it, the more I make leeway. And so they're a very good example of what not to do. And the reason I do this podcast or anything else on social media is to make this aware to the public. They have a tendency of hiding things and trying to lay low, yet continue to violate people's rights and harm the people they're supposed to be protecting. And so this particular organization is the one I focus on the most. And I can focus on the officials directly now because they've kind of limited me on helping out the inmates. So since I can't help the inmates in the capacity that I used to a few years ago, I'll just concentrate mostly on the officials. And so that's what I want to concentrate on in these series of podcasts that I'm doing. Now, just to give you a background on this ethics story here, about 6 years ago or so, I would send email to folks and they would send me letters and things and I'd publish them and then I would go to certain officials to try to resolve their issues. And it was keeping me busy because they would recommend me and then I was getting more and more people added to my contacts. And then somebody over at the DOC decided they didn't like that and so blocked my e-messaging. I asked why and was told that I was violating policy and I didn't follow their rules or something. They were just coming up with just making up stuff. And it was very vague. I really couldn't fight it. And they were saying that I was violating policy. So since they didn't give any specific policy, I went through and read all of them, any of them that related to me. I couldn't find any violations that I was doing. Finally, they were saying that I was using aliases to open up accounts. Now, when it first started out, they told me that they were going to shut down my account for 6 months while they conducted an investigation. Now, back in the 80s, I was a criminal investigator for the Tennessee Bureau of Investigations. So I'm very familiar with investigative techniques. And it could take years to bring a case to court. So I can understand them needing time, but 6 months telling me that I can't use my e-messaging, it just didn't click. There was nothing in their policy, nothing in state or federal law that said you can shut down somebody's method of communication, cut off their free speech while conducting an investigation. And of course, I couldn't get any answers or anything on that. So this was their silly little thing. So I decided, well, I'll just wait. Well, they were saying that I was still using it while I wasn't supposed to be, and they were going to shut it down. And that's their official reason, is because they were doing this investigation. And then they said that if you open up the account or another one, we're going to close it down permanently. So when it was closed down, I needed to get the official word. What's going on? You opened up other accounts using an alias. What alias? And I would send email after email and I'd get these cookie cutter responses, very vague. I violated policy. Well, persistence was the best thing I had with them. Eventually, they were saying that I was using my ex-wife, or actually it wasn't using my ex-wife. They were saying I was my ex-wife. And of course, my response is, you know what? I will meet you in Olympia. We can discuss this, but I want the press to be there so you can tell the press that my ex-wife and I are the same person. But that didn't go anywhere. And even though they never proved that I used an alias, never proved that I did anything wrong, that I violated any of the user agreement or policy or any laws, they continued to keep it blocked. So I would conduct my regular business. I would work with family members and loved ones, and I would work with community leaders, and it's quite a task. It's a lot of work to advocate for the prison in the state of Washington. And then every once in a while, as a side thing, I would just throw out an email. They would come back sometimes with, "You violated the policies," or, "Why are you writing all these emails?" And I would say, "Well, because you never answer anything." Well, year after year, I'm doing this. It's a normal thing for me until we get a new governor. And then there's a new Secretary of Department of Corrections. Now, whenever there's a change in my work, in my advocacy roles, I like to take advantage of it. So I read up on the governor, read up on the new secretary, and found out these two are well versed in the legal process in the state of Washington. Both of them worked in the Attorney General's office. Of course, Bob Ferguson, the governor, was the Attorney General before he was elected governor, and he appointed Tim Lang, who worked specifically with the Department of Corrections when he was in the Attorney General's office. That's good, because they're familiar with the law, they're familiar with rights. So I wrote a letter, or an email actually, to the new secretary, and to my surprise, he looked into a situation that I had. That's good. Now, what had happened to me was I got engaged, and you can see that story on my YouTube channel, and I call that one WAGOV Marriage Prevention. It's under the Joel Wilburn YouTube channel. But I got engaged, and I sent her a Christmas card, and the Christmas card was returned. I've never had a letter blocked, but it was returned, said unauthorized communication. That was written on it. It was returned to sender. Now, that's not a reason to return a letter. There are different reasons. I mean, if it's contraband, or if it's missing part of the address, like maybe the DOC number, not the full name, and you can return the sender. And that's the right, because they're the representative for the people that are locked up, the people in the mailroom. But return to sender with a legal card, unopened, is not what policy states. In their policy, which I've had to read over and over again, the people, when there's a rejection, a mail rejection, need to be notified. And it contains explicit pictures maybe. And so we rejected it. And it gives the sender and the addressee an opportunity to appeal. So if I send a letter and they're telling me that it contains some explicit pictures, I could send in an appeal. These are pictures of minors in their bathing suits at the pool. They're not explicit. And they could say, no, they're explicit. You shouldn't have scantily clothed toddlers in a photograph. And then I could send it to headquarters, and headquarters could say, no, there's nothing wrong with this. They were at a public pool. They were dressed appropriately for the pool, allowed to go through. And then that's the end of it. Most appeals that I make, I win. I'd say over 98, 99% of them. There's a small percentage that I lose. So the appeal process I've gotten quite comfortable with, and they would constantly block me for stuff. But this was unusual. I wasn't notified. She wasn't notified. It just came back. So I snapped a picture of it and I sent them an email. And this was just the general DOC email. And I sent it to them stating, I got this card back. It doesn't follow policy. I am going to remail it. If you don't follow policy, I am going to report it to the USPS Postmaster General. I sent it off. It came back. So I reported it to the United States Postal Service, who said, we're going to take care of this. What the prison did was wrong. I was very happy. New ally. So I sent out some more cards to different people, and all of them came back with these crazy little things on there. Not allowed or unauthorized. It was just weird that they were returning the sender. And so I contacted the the United States Postal Service again. They said, we're going to contact the local post office. I haven't had anything returned since. So I wrote a letter to the secretary, and the secretary signed it to the appropriate people. And I got back this letter. And of course, well, they sent me back, so they need more time, and it took them a month. And then I had to send another email. What's the response? And a week later, they said, oh, we sent it out before, and blah, blah, blah. And then it was just standard stuff in this letter stating that we didn't do anything wrong. You don't follow policy. You're a terrible person. And they started restricting even more things. I can't visit. I can't receive phone calls. I can't receive any mail. And they're going to follow the policy, which I haven't seen since the new regime came in. I haven't seen them follow the policy properly. But oh my goodness, they sure claim that I don't. Well, here's the interesting thing. As I'm reading through this letter, standard cookie cutter stuff, I've been asking for years what aliases I've been using. Because once I get that information, I could easily defend myself. Because if they're saying, hey, you're your ex-wife, I can say, no, I'm not. Here's the proof, even though they reject it. Well, they mentioned a real person. They said, you use this name. It just came out of the blue. But it was exactly what I needed. And so what I discovered when I saw that, and of all the things that they were saying, that you don't follow policy and you're this terrible person, the fact that they've been saying that I use an alias to send out stuff, and then they named this person. Now, here's what I caught. It's my background as a criminal investigator. When I did undercover work, somebody came up and said, my name is Billy. I'm not going to sit there and say, well, can you prove that? Give me 2 forms of identification. That doesn't work with undercover work, especially buying drugs. I had to accept Billy. And back in the 80s, it was really tough to identify a person. So week after week, month after month, I was dealing with Billy. When I got enough evidence, we could arrest Billy, do some fingerprints, probably identify who it was. Could be Frankie Smith. Nowadays, it's a little easier. You have the DNA, and you have even cameras can snap a picture and identify people. But identity is really tough, And so if you're using an alias, it's not easy to identify who is using that alias. And opening accounts to identify somebody is open. Even the provider, JPay and Securus, they have a difficult time identifying fake accounts, alias accounts, maybe a double account they can. But in this letter, they were stating that they were tracking my credit card. That right there was a red flag. Tracking my credit card to show that I opened an account. Well, you don't need a credit card to open an account. You just use them to fund the inmates, fund phone, or to buy stamps to send the e-messages. And I would have a habit of buying stamps for somebody, because I would ask somebody to send a letter or an e-message to someone. I don't have any stamps. I buy the stamps. Well, that doesn't mean I opened up this account. It doesn't mean I used an alias. It just means I bought a stamp. That's easy to prove. I don't hide that. But that they're tracking my credit card for this, that's illegal. And even Secura says we protect your credit card, and it's only to be used for business purposes. Tracking people's account, Securus and JPay, they don't do that. But this DOC in this letter claimed that they do that. And so that right there is something I have to deal with later. But when they gave this name of this person and said that I used that name to open up an account, here's what I want to put as a background on that. You have an alias and you have identity theft. I immediately looked at that as, since this is a person, this is not an alias. I can't use a real person's name, a living, breathing individual as an alias. See, an alias, the definition, is a false or alternate name that a person uses, often voluntarily, to represent themselves in specific contexts. It doesn't necessarily involve stealing someone else's identity. It's typically used for legitimate or neutral reasons like privacy, convenience, or professional purposes. Example, a pen name for an author, a stage name for an actor, or a nickname. And using an alias is generally legal as long as it's not used to deceive or commit fraud. For example, if you use an alias on social media or in casual settings without issue, but representing yourself in legal or financial contexts could cross into illegal territory. Now, that's like when you do an email and you use Huggy Baby. That's an alias. It's not illegal. And another example is like J.K. Rowling's. It's a pseudonym that she chose instead of using her legal name, which is Joanne Rowling. Now, identity theft. It's the unauthorized and fraudulent use of someone else's personal information, like name, social security number, credit card details, to impersonate them, usually for financial gain or other illegal purposes. It's explicitly malicious, aimed at exploiting or harming the victim, often by stealing money, opening accounts, or committing crimes in their name. Identity theft is illegal and a serious crime in most jurisdictions, as it violates privacy and causes harm to the victim. An example is someone stealing your credit card info to make purchases or applying for a loan in your name without your knowledge. Now, the key differences: consent. An alias is chosen by the individual for themselves. Identity theft involves taking someone else's identity without permission. Purpose. An alias serves as a personal or practical function. Identity theft is about exploitation or fraud. And legal standing. Aliases are fine in many cases, while identity theft is a criminal act. They accused me of identity theft. Using this person's name is not an alias. Any law enforcement person, even you guys out there who are listeners who are armchair detectives or just common everyday citizens like the rest of us, know that. But the DOC was trying to tell me that this name is something they recognize, they've associated with me. I don't know how, but that's what they came up with. To me, if you have a person's name, that person is using their account legally. They opened it, they're using it legally. So I'm thinking, were these other aliases, I could put that in quotations there, real people? And they're just saying, because this person mentioned you, or because this person quoted you, or this person was recommending you, we shut down this account and we're associating it with you. I need to know that stuff. So I'm doing something that's called structured choice. And it's where a person commits a wrong, like accusing me of identity theft. And then I give alternate punishment or options. And it works really well with children. You know, if a person breaks a rule in the house and you say, do you want to be grounded for a week or have your phone privileges taken away? It puts the person who committed this wrong in the decision process. Now, with the DOC, I use that a lot. I like structured choice. So I told them, either we can solve this in a courtroom and you can present your evidence and I can prove to you that I did not steal this person's identity, or even use an alias. And then you have to prove to me, using all your resources, that you used my credit card, which bought stamps, that prove somehow that I opened up another account using an alias. Or you can just unlock these blocked accounts, unlock my blocked account, stop using this alias, identity theft nonsense to restrict me from communicating with anybody who's locked up. That's your choice. And a legal thing like that takes a while. So when I sent that to him and said, I don't like this, you have this choice, they didn't immediately come back with an answer. And that's expected, because if you receive something from like a creditor that says either you pay us this money or we're going to go to court, court in any statement that you get should be taken seriously, because if you get the legal paperwork later and it could have been prevented, the judge is not going to be too happy. It's like, you got this information, you ignored it, you could have prevented coming here, you're wasting my time. And you don't want to go in with a judge who says, this is crazy. All this information was given up front and you wanted to come to court. So I want to give them that choice. And if it does go to court, I'll say, this is my email. I gave them a month or 2 months to make a decision. They just chose to ignore it. Here we are in court. That works in my favor, works against them, because the judge is going to look to them and say, I didn't have to be here because all you had to do is solve this. And most likely what I'm asking for is that the stuff be restored. All my privileges, the rights that they took away from me, be restored. And I could get that by winning the court case. I could have just gotten it by not going to court, wasting the judge's time, but blah, that's the DOC. And that's the ethical dilemma I'm in. These folks feel that they can do whatever they want and nobody's going to follow up on that. I hear that a lot for the inmates, and now I have a chance to go to court and publicly announce, along with their backing, that they did something wrong. And if a judge rules in my favor, I have proof that I can use for an eternity. When I worked with Paula Gardner, and that's another story you can see on my YouTube channel, she went in relatively healthy, came out with terminal cancer, due in part because they failed to follow policy. I wanted her to go to court and broadcast all this stuff, but she felt that she could die before the end of the court. And that's her right. I can't argue with that. She got a settlement, but she wasn't supposed to talk about this stuff. Non-disclosure agreement. So for the DOC, that's good, because you sweep everything under the table. And we, the public, we don't know what's going on. So it looks like, oh, the DOC is doing their job. We haven't heard anything bad. This particular case, I can take to court. Either they fix it and I can broadcast the stuff, or we go to court and I can broadcast the stuff. You folks, the listeners, the viewers, you have the right to know what's going on in these Department of Corrections centers. And it's our job as supporter of relationships, advocates, reformers, to share that. And hopefully the news media. But they need a little more than what we have. In the social media, we can go by hearsay. But the press, they need to get facts, because they could be sued. And so we gather facts, we give it to them. I can give the local newspaper facts, and they can publish this information without retribution. And I won't hide myself as an anonymous source. I will come out. I'm the one who said all this. And that's the issue I'm dealing with now. That lets you know that the Department of Corrections will use every means possible, I suppose, whether it's legal or not, to get their way. And we can't have that. One of the reasons the DOC gets away with so much stuff is because they're not in the public. They can pay off people and keep bad things out of the public. Or since the public is limited in their access, because there's a lot of privacy concerns, we don't really hear what's going on. But there are people sitting in prison and their rights are just being stomped on. And a lot of them are being harmed. We need to stop this. We need to keep this in the public's eye. This isn't a thing that when a major accident happens or a major event happens, it's in the news and then it goes away. We got to keep this in the news constantly so that when the DOC decides we're going to block this person from speaking to inmates and nobody's going to stop us, somebody's got to look at it and say, wait a minute, we had an incident that went to court and we lost, and we don't want to do that again. So let's rethink this. Maybe things will work out to our advantage, but there's only one way to find out. Let's do it. Well, thanks for tuning in. I hope you sit with your friends and family and your loved ones and talk about things like this. And like the crime mantra, if you see something, say something. If you have a loved one who's incarcerated, contact an advocate, contact a social media influencer, contact the press, contact an attorney, say something. Let's put an end to this. And you have the power to do that. Well, go out and have yourself a magnificent day and make fabulous memories for tomorrow.